Sure. So I've got a six-person family. I'm the oldest of four kids, and I have three little sisters, which I very much enjoy. My dad and mom were about 25 when they had me. And then my sister came 2 years later, and then 4 year gap, and then another two sisters 2 years apart after that. And they're named Chloe, Hazel, and Willow. And my parents are Chris and April. And we have a very kind of fun-loving family that kind of pushes each other to be better, but is also there for each other when things don't go the way we want. And we have somewhat of a family identity that we kind of all try to maintain. We try to be people who are generous and people who are thoughtful and observant and always willing to hear people out. And I think that's been probably like the single most important factor in my life, is having those three little sisters. I had to grow up quick. I had to be, watching my three little sisters when I was 10 and making them dinner and making sure they didn't jump off the roof and stuff like that. And so that made me just kind of grow up fast, learn responsibility, learn kind of, the role of being an older brother, especially when you have three little sisters and they're, you know, trying to find their way, and you can be sort of a protector, but you don't want to be too imposing on them. And actually, one thing that was kind of funny was when I got into Colby, I was talking to Chloe, and Chloe and I are pretty similar. Just she's a girl, and so I was kind of like, oh, you should try to apply to Colby. And it was just funny because obviously we have a great relationship, but she said like, hey, I'm not going anywhere near your school.
Yeah.
And in terms of going through things, I think when I was about to break up with Zoe, I just was having a really tough time. Just like, she was just at college, and it was literally I was just like worried she was gonna kiss some other dude. Like, that was like my whole thing. And Chloe just helped me through that so much, and just was like there to like be sad with me, like tell me it's gonna be okay. And like when I like kind of followed her advice and all that stuff, it wasn't the first time she's helped me like a lot, but it was one of those things where I was like, wow, like Chloe really just like was my rock through a really, really big moment in my life at the time. And I think, from now on, like, she is probably the first person I go to for any serious decision I make. But I usually am like, I'm trying to be, a leader by example, but also like I do try to share my experiences, good and bad, with them. I had a trip. I think we went on like a walk or something with Hazel and Willow, and a very similar thing. I was just kind of telling them stories about high school, because they've always been significantly younger than me in terms of their life stage, but now they're in high school and I'm out of college, and like that's not quite as big a difference as like senior in high school and like fifth grader. And so just telling them stories about like times I like really wish I didn't drink that much, or like this is probably someone's going to offer you this, and like here's how to do it. And like just to see them, instead of just being like, oh gross, like to actually ask me questions and like learning about it. And like just sort of, I think that was one of the first moments they realized that I was a resource for them. I wasn't just sort of like there to like make expectations the way they were or whatever. Like, I'm an open book. What do you want to know about like how this shit goes? Like, I'll tell you everything you want to know. My goal is just so that they can learn from my mistakes and not make them, themselves. There's two real big things that I've gotten out of them. And the first is that leadership, that sort of sense of responsibility. But the other thing is really just a different level of understanding and respect for women that I've noticed that I have, that a lot of the men my age do not, who grow up either without sisters, or maybe their sisters were kind of brats or something like that, or they didn't have a great relationship. I just find especially when I became older and started to have like relationships with women and things like that, I just found that I generally was a lot more cautious than other guys at my age generally, wouldn't do anything without really making sure it was okay with them. And I always kind of had their interest in mind, more so than I think most of the people my age who are men. And that's something I'm really, really grateful for. Not only just the caution around that subject, but also just understanding, women are different, but they're just people. So that's been really helpful for me, just learning, what it's like for a girl to grow up and have to go to middle school and go to high school and deal with shit that sucks. So I think that was one of the biggest impacts on my life from having a bunch of sisters. But I think in that regard, just having both examples of like I can live in a family where everyone's very similar, but also there's difference within that family, and I think that sort of helps us sort of like build a tolerance and an ability to work with each other. And like being similar means you're doing things together and you're having fun, but you're also like arguing really hard and you're going through
Yeah.
things where you both wanted to use the Wii or whatever. So it's like I think having sort of a little bit of a combination and the variety of the people that you grow up with really helps, because the way that I handle my relationship with Hazel and the way that I handle my relationship with Willow and the way that I handle my relationship with Chloe is all very different. So that's been very helpful, just to learn how to talk to different people and figure out what makes them tick and stuff like that. Well, I think that's a great point you bring up. Like we have democracy on our side in some sense. We've got four of us. And so if four of us are saying something, that my mom and dad will be like, oh shit, like these are all my kids. Like, like
Yeah.
that's a bigger deal. And there's a lot of conflict with my parents that stems from conflict with my siblings. Like if I'm not doing something correctly with a younger sister or something like they can get mad at me for that. So that can kind of cause some turbulence. But I think overall, having a larger family just makes you more adaptable to new situations in terms of
Got you.
like, just if one person's having a bad day, that, there's five other people to pick them up there, or five people to call someone out on their BS if they're doing something. I think growing up as the oldest kid, I sort of had a little bit of an only child experience in that I was doing everything first, and I was the first to do, like first to make a varsity team, first to, take the SATs, to go to college, and all these things were celebrations for my whole family because it was the first time. And so I almost feel like I kind of got some of the benefits of being an only child and didn't have to have some of the cons. But like honestly, I would say I occasionally think that, but pretty often I'm pretty happy that I've got a big family.